Hi, everybody. Craig Shacklett here, CEO of TRIO360. I've got a special guest today, Azam Husain, the CEO of Casino Science. And if you haven't heard already, we actually recently announced a partnership between TRIO360 and Casino Science. It's very exciting. It makes TRIO360 even more powerful than it was before. And so we're going to get to that later in the interview. But I want to start off with talking to Oz about Casino Science and kind of the origin story and what problems you solve and how you guys became really leaders with regards to data analytics and insights in the casino space. So Oz, thank you for being here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Craig, for inviting me to the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to the partnership ahead of us.
Anybody that's listened to my podcast knows I love hearing entrepreneurial stories. I love talking to entrepreneurs. So why don't we start with telling us about Casino Science's origin story?
Okay, well, to start, let me tell you about where we are, and then I'll tell you from where we started, because it's such a stark difference. Casino Science is a data science and analytics solutions company. We work exclusively in tribal and commercial gaming across Canada and the US. And what we do is we provide casino operators with things like managed services and packaged analytic solutions. And so in many cases, what we do for a lot of properties across the US, we manage and analyze millions of direct mail rewards every year. And then in 2020, Casino Science was recognized by CIO Review magazine as one of the 10 most promising technology solution providers in the casino space. So that's where we are today. How we got to this point is actually quite interesting, because it was not a very straight and narrow path. We were founded in 2016, and the origins of Casino Science actually were a little bit before that. I had a friend, a childhood friend actually, from my time living in Canada. I'm Canadian, if you can't tell the accent. I had a childhood friend living in Vancouver at the time. He had a game studio, and he was interested in selling his business. And so he sent over a deck that described his business and went through all the financials and the value proposition for the business. And he got me to look at the pitch deck and look at the financials. And I looked through everything, and I'm thinking, why would you sell this business? This business is actually doing really well, and there could be some interesting things that you could do with this business. Like, what if you were to use all the data that comes from all these games that you produce? And he was a developer of social casino games. Why don't you use the data that's inside all these games to make better decisions about how to bring in those players that are using those games to come on property, like physically come to a casino to actually play, and you use the games as just a mechanism for drawing the players in, but you use all that data to figure out who you should market to. And I pitched him this idea of using a bunch of data science techniques that I was working on when I was at Microsoft. I'm ex-Microsoft. I was in Microsoft for about 10 years. And he was sold on that idea. So we went and we built a V1 version of the product, and we started talking to operators, a lot of different operators across the US. I probably spoke to, in the first few months, and this was back in 2015, I probably spoke to a good 100, 150 operators, different operators at different places in the US. And I told him this story and the vision of this company that we were going to develop. We're going to develop these social casino games, and then we're going to use the data as a way to help analyze who are the right types of players to actually promote to, so that they could actually physically come in on property to actually spend money. Because if you could make some money using social casino games, but you could make significantly more if they actually come in on property. And the feedback that I got from operators was kind of muted. It was like, yeah, this is kind of an interesting idea. But we actually have a bigger problem, because we have data sitting in all these different systems. We've got data sitting in the casino management system. We've got data sitting inside the point of sale system. We have data that's sitting in this data warehouse. We have data that's in this other silo. We have problems managing just the corpus of data that we've got within our organization. If you can help us with that, that would be even better. And that's when we had this like light bulb moment. It was like, aha, maybe actually the problem is not so much like using data to get people to come and play. It's using existing data that's already sitting within the four walls of the casino. And that kind of started us on this journey that is casino science.
So that's fascinating. I never heard that story. So thank you. And I've got questions about it. So,
okay.
Okay, so let me get it straight. So it was this gentleman, your friend had a social casino game.
Yep.
And
it's a social casino gaming studio.
And so the thesis was, all right, people that are into the social casino games probably have a propensity to want to also play in casinos, and we can use the social casino game as kind of a lab to find the right players. So you would identify certain characteristics that,
exactly.
Oh, here's one that we can send an offer and get him into a physical casino.
Exactly. We were using the social casino games as a proxy to really understand the behavior of a player. Because there's a lot of interesting signals that get sent in these games that could potentially be a factor for bringing them into the casino. And so we were running under that assumption that, hey, maybe this is a way for us to get those players to move from the online world. We bridge the online world and bridge them into the brick and mortar world.
Did you already have a relationship with all these operators from Microsoft? Is that how you were able to get in front of them? Because
no,
not always easy to get in front of 100 different operators.
No, actually it wasn't. It was actually really hard. And a lot of it was actually just doing a lot of cold calls with operators. And one of the nice things, I spent a lot of time connecting with tribal operators to begin with here, just mainly because just proximity here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm based in Seattle. And there are a lot of tribal casino operators in this area. So I just would connect with them. And the nice thing about it was that everyone was very generous with their time. They were very willing and able to spend a significant amount of time with somebody who knew nothing about being a casino operator. And so it was just more like spending time, having conversations with folks, and just more than anything, just sitting and listening. I think that's like the art of listening is kind of gone away. Everyone likes to talk, but I really spent a lot of time just trying to listen to what people had to say. And I think that the act of just listening, that was how we were able to discover that there was actually a much bigger problem with operators, and that was the fact that they had this corpus of data sitting in all these different silos across the entire organization, that we realized that was actually the real problem that operators had, and that was the problem that really deserved to be solved. It was interesting when in the first 6 months of the company's inception, we discovered that there were these three big problems that operators have when it comes to data. They have this problem of time. So operators are stretched really thin across a multitude of different activities during the course of their day. And marketers especially if you look at like small to mid-sized operators, they might have a marketing team that's maybe 2, maybe 3 people. In some cases, it's just a single person. And that person has to stretch their time over a multitude of different activities. The second challenge we found was this problem of skills. Like a lot of the marketing folks, they have great marketing skills, but when it comes to some of the technical skills that are necessary in order to like extract data from a system and then kind of make sense out of it, some folks were just, they didn't have the right skill set in order to actually figure this out. And then the final thing that we discovered was that a lot of folks were just very price sensitive. Like they didn't want to invest again in yet another data warehouse or another BI system. They didn't want to spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on yet another BI system. And so again, that's where the light bulbs went off and we realized, hey, there is something we could create something that's slightly different to help with this set of problems that operators have.
And so when you decided to pivot, was it essentially starting from scratch, or were a lot of these equations and things that you kind of pictured looking for with the original business, would you just say, oh, actually we can plug in real casino data instead of social casino data? Like how big of a restart was it?
Yeah, it was interesting because we did just that. We were like, well, let's actually plug in real casino data. And for a lot of the algorithms and models that we've created, why don't we just leverage the stuff that we've already created? And then we also did a few interesting things. We started to work on very, very targeted consulting engagements. This was very early on in the inception of the company. And we focused on like very core types of problems. So we'd have an operator that would come to us and say, we're looking at changing the segmentation of our player database. And what do we need to do in order to have an optimal number of tiers, have the right number of players in each one of those tiers? And so we took kind of this data science algorithmic approach to try to solve these types of problems. And as we were solving these types of problems, we started to embed ourselves into the organization. So we started to learn about the processes that they followed. We started to learn about some of the challenges that an operator would have when it came to running their direct mail. We started learning about some of the challenges that hosts and host teams have. And that started to get our wheels turning in the types of services and the types of solutions that we could offer up to operators. So it was really the genesis of really the solution side of the company was really formed when we started spending more and more time in these consulting and services engagements, where we were really learning about the intricacies of being a casino operator, because that really helped to make it clear in our minds where we wanted to provide value as a solution provider.
And was that I think it's the last question about the original business, because I think it's so interesting too, but was the original business model a consulting model as well? So the pricing approach was the same when you went to your clients, or did that change as well?
Yeah, the pricing model also changed because initially we thought it was going to be a business that was all going to be consumed around these social casino games, and that we would be using the data as a way as a mechanism for learning about those players and then putting promotions in front of those players. So the pricing was kind of geared towards that model. And then when we made this pivot after we started realizing that, hey, I think the consulting solutions approach is actually the right way to move the business, we changed our model to kind of focus more on that part of the business. So now our business is broken up into two parts. The first part of our business is really focused on consulting. And there are two parts of the consulting business. The first part of the consulting business is we'll have operators that will approach us and ask us to solve very, very targeted types of casino marketing problems. Like that one operator that approached us about segmentation and changing their segmentation for their mailer matrix. And then we'll have another category of operator that will approach us and say, hey, we need to find a way to staff analysts in our marketing department or in our finance department with all these technical skills, and can you help place these analysts for us? And so what we do is we place actual casino science analysts with finance teams and with marketing teams, either physically on site or working hybrid or remote, and they essentially become an extension of the casino operations and the marketing teams and the finance teams. So that's the first part of the business. The second part of our business focused on more of these packaged solutions offerings. So, for example, we built a solution to automate direct mail and the audience selection of direct mail and the submission to the direct mail house. And we have another solution that does slot floor optimization, which is just the optimization of the machines on the physical floor to ensure that you get a much better take from the floor. And it's just a solution that allows you to reconfigure the machines on the floor so that you can actually get a better return. And it's all based on this very advanced math that one of our partner companies worked on to help figure out what's the best spatial arrangement of those machines on the floor. But that's a package type of solution. So our business is really now, it's morphed into these two parts. Both one is on the consulting side and the other is on these packaged solutions side.
So when you take on a new client on either side, but I guess probably more the human, the high touch human side, how do you engage, like, how do you analyze the market to figure out what's going to be different versus the same? Because obviously you work with a lot of casinos. There's probably common threads that everyone you can come in and maybe 80% is you follow the same playbook. But how do you analyze that other 20% that, oh, it's going to be different in this market?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we have not all gaming jurisdictions are the same. So for example, in the Pacific Northwest, where I'm based, this is a hyper-competitive market for gaming. And another good example is in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is also a hyper-competitive market. There's about 140 casinos in a very narrow part of the state. It's funny because I was there just a few months ago. I was driving through Oklahoma, and it's like every 5-10 miles you run into another casino, you run into another one. So it's very different. We also have customers that are in these kind of more rural and more remote parts of the country. So for example, we have a bunch of customers that are in rural parts of California or Oregon. We have customers that are in rural parts of Wisconsin. And the thing about it is that in those markets, it's very different, the type of player that comes out to those markets. Those markets are they're more locals based. Their ADT values tend to be much lower than you would find in more urban environments. Like, for example, we have a customer in Canada that's in an urban area. Their ADTs for their players, they tend to be on the high side, about 400, 500. Like, that's pretty high.
Yeah.
We have another customer in Wisconsin. Their ADTs tend to be about 130, 140, which is high for them, for the area that they're operating in, but relative to this other urban customer, very low. So you treat them differently in the sense that you have to understand the demographic of player. You have to understand what motivates those types of players. You have to understand what are the types of messages that you put in front of those players to actually draw them in, so that they can actually make a purchase decision inside your casino. I think also the other thing, especially from our experiences here in the Pacific Northwest, in the hyper-competitive markets, there's a lot of analysis of what the competitor is doing. So, for example, in one of our operators, we developed a model to evaluate where of the customer's player database, where were the competitors, and of the players that were inside the customer's database, could we attribute those players to the competitor's database and then send them targeted messages to come in? So essentially what we're doing is we're using this as a method to try to steal those players away from competitors. So the tactics in hyper-competitive markets, they tend to be a little bit different. In more locals markets, in more rural parts of the US, we tend to follow on more traditional tactics, leveraging things like the direct mail programs. So it kind of depends on the market that you're looking at. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to this notion of you either increase revenue. So when I look at the success criteria for casino science and the work that we do and the work that our folks do, it really comes down, there's two things. We look at how have we helped our customers shepherd the casino to either increase revenue and or reduce expenses. And for us, the case of using data science as a mechanism for increasing revenue and decreasing cost, it's never been more relevant today than in any other point in our history. And in the face of this really incredible competition, you have to use data as kind of that strategic asset. Because at the end of the day, irrespective of what market that you operate in, the patron share of wallet, it's not increasing. So you have to find ways to either steal it from someone else or increase the slice from existing players. And that's essentially what we do in any market that we work in.
That's really interesting. So the idea is when you say share of wallet isn't increasing, are you saying like overall budget, it's basically a zero-sum game? Is that
it is. It is. The pandemic aside, the pandemic is an anomalous event here. And I know that we're seeing a lot of our customers and a lot of folks out there are seeing huge revenue gains on the gaming side. That's an anomaly. But it is a zero-sum game. You're going to see like minor increases in growth when it comes to casino revenue across the U.S. So the reality is, if you really want to really get the growth that you want, you can't really significantly increase the size of your players. You can if you try some net new acquisition strategies, but ultimately what you need to do is you need to use data to kind of figure out how can you steal these players from someplace else, or how do you increase their budget so they actually spend more with you.
So you identify the players that maybe if you invest a little more, you can drive more trips from them, and players that are going to come anyway, maybe you can invest a little bit less.
Exactly. Yeah, and what we do, we spend a lot of time looking at opportunities to increase to just that one incremental trip. Like, how do you get them to do one more trip or two more trips, or spend just incrementally more, or can they spend just 10% or 20% more time on device? Because if they spend 10 or 20% more time on device, then that's going to translate on the aggregate over time into more revenue for the operator.
I would love to see a study sometime. Maybe you've done this and it's proprietary, but for example, where I live in Dallas, there's Choctaw and there's WinStar, and they are two just mega casinos, beautiful casinos.
Yep.
And if you live on the east side of the DFW area, we call it the Metroplex out here, your Choctaw is the closer casino. If you live on the west side or Fort Worth, then WinStar is closer casino. But there's got to be, there's certain spots where it's pretty much even, right? And then you move a little bit over here, maybe it's 10 extra minutes to drive to WinStar and vice versa. And I'd be fascinated to see, all right, when it's hour drive each direction, like obviously the offer probably is the bigger factor, but then if it's an hour, 10 minutes to go to one casino versus 50 minutes to go to the other, what's the math there? I think that would just be fascinating to see. Like, as the drive time, the difference, the delta gets bigger, how do you overcome it? What's the cost to drive the trips?
Yeah. We've actually done some research in this space with operators in actually different parts of the country where drive friction can sometimes be a problem. So, for example, You look at the Midwest, you look at parts of Washington State and Oregon, where you get some like really bad winters. And sometimes the ability to drive to the operator, that can be a friction point, because if you have to go through snow, or if you have to go through like drive like a considerable distance, you might not make that decision. You might decide that, okay, well, maybe it's worth more me being closer to, maybe I should play at this property that's only 10 minutes from me, as opposed to traveling like 30 minutes to this other property, where they may give me a little bit more in terms of a free play or a comp, but I have to actually spend some time in the car driving there, and it's like the dead of winter, and I don't want to drive on icy conditions. So we have looked at that, and definitely what I can tell you is that drive friction is an issue with a lot of operators, especially in areas where there is where you can have bad weather, or you can have winter conditions, but that tends to be more seasonal. I think the thing that is actually more interesting in some of the research that we've done is this notion of promiscuity. And this is this notion that players, irrespective of distance, assume distance is equal, and all things equal, the distance is maybe only incrementally different. The reality is that they're probably still going to play at a variety of different casinos that are in your geographic location. And that probably won't change. If I look at, for example, going back to the Seattle area as kind of the example here, all the players that are playing at casinos in the greater Seattle area, they've likely played at all the major casinos. There's about 7 casinos in this area. They've likely played at all of them. And we were able to discover this just by using some novel data science techniques to kind of figure out relative location of all these players. And the reality is that all these players, at least in the player database that we were looking at, probably a good 85–90% of them were promiscuous, which means that they don't have a set loyalties, that they divide their loyalties across multiple casinos, and it's not just about going to one casino. And I think that would be pretty typical in other markets as well.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's an unsolvable problem, like the perfect loyalty program, because that's kind of the big lever for how casinos try to get loyalty, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, you got to get to this extra tier, the next tier, and then we had an interview with Ben Koff, who works at Scarlet Pearl, but I've known him from Caesars. Anyway, they talked about how there's always the like a cliff. Like sometimes players, they hit a certain tier and they're like, all right, I'm good here, and then they go and be promiscuous for the last 3 months of the year.
Yeah.
But there's no, I assume there's never like a perfect loyalty program where you're going to eliminate the cliff.
No, I don't think there is a perfect loyalty program. I mean, you'll always see, there will be players that obviously they have some loyalty to your property, but they have, in most cases, they'll have divided loyalties because they themselves, they know how to play the game, especially those VIP players. They know how those programs, the casino operators, how their programs work, and they know how they work, and they know the rules very, very well. And so it's more difficult with that set of players to actually find a loyalty program that is absolutely going to work. So everyone has to like all operators have to kind of fight for the attentions of their players.
Well, you mentioned VIP players, and obviously that's a area near and dear to our hearts, to especially with TRIO360. And of course, as we allude to at the beginning, that we just announced a partnership where Casino Science will be providing tier 1 support for TRIO360 clients, as well as building new insights and data analytic features directly into TRIO360 to help help host teams and player development teams get the most, deliver the best customer service, get the most revenue out of that VIP segment. So zeroing in on that area, the VIP players that generally have a host or a player development person assigned to them. What are some of those challenges that you see with with your customers in that area that and maybe specifically problems that TRIO360 can solve?
Yeah, one of the things that I often hear when I talk about when I'm talking to player development teams is a lot of folks, they ask me, how do I get my team to become hunters rather than huggers? And this is kind of a model that, for the longest time, like tribal operators and some commercial, but I think you see it a lot more with tribal operators. They develop a host team, and that host team, the primary responsibilities for that host team is just to make the customer feel good, the high value customers feel good. They get them comps, they would get them drinks, they would get them dinners or tickets, and they would just do these things in order to ensure that the player was well recognized and treated with that extra care. But as as things have gotten more competitive and now people are trying to hold the player development teams to a little bit more precision when it comes to, okay, what are those exact activities that you're doing? I'm finding that a lot of the conversation now when it comes to talking to player development managers is, how is it that we can transform our host huggers into actually becoming hunters? So how do I make that transition from being the more account management team where I just feel out how the customer is doing to actually a sales-driven team where they actually are being used as a way to help generate incremental revenue for me? And the reality is that there's actually a lot of things that have to happen in order for an operator to move to like a sales-based model. There's a bunch of organizational things that have to happen. There are a bunch of performance things that need to change. But there's actually a bunch of initial steps that you have to do in order to actually manage the transition to a more sales-driven model. And I tell folks that all of this is absolutely doable. You absolutely can transition into this sales team, but it requires the right types of structures to be in place to ensure that you're actually marching towards that type of a North Star. And first and foremost, you need to have those operational structures in place to ensure that you're tracking the performance of your host team. So that means that you have to do three things. One, you have to have a framework for evaluating performance. Two, you need to have a method to compare performance of hosts relative to one another and to prior time periods. And three, you need a mechanism to inform the host on the performance. They need to know this is how we're going to evaluate you. This is your goal, and this is how we're going to evaluate your progress towards that goal. And this is, if I think about our partnership, this is exactly where we're striving to do that, because essentially what we're doing is we're building all of these capabilities to evaluate the effectiveness of the hosts by using the TRIO solution, and then by using the solution that we've developed, TRIO Host Insights, to actually allow the hosts to move the needle on the dial, to book more trips, get greater and incremental revenue by doing all the tracking.
Very well said, Oz. I'm excited for people to be able to see Host Insight and to see it in action. And I know that that's one of the exciting parts about this, is that TRIO Host Insights is going to be built into every deployment, and because it's a cloud-based solution, we can actually spin it up in a matter of days, really, so people can actually see the results, try it out themselves, and get benefit in again, a matter of days. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about partnering with you and the Casino Science
I
team.
do.
So I know we're going to do another interview soon where the roles are reversed and you'll be interviewing me. Are you ready for that?
I am. I'm looking forward to your origin story.
Awesome. Well, Oz, thank you so much for taking some time today to discuss your background, Casino Science, as well as our new partnership. And I'm looking forward to a lot of work together, a lot of exciting projects.
Me too. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Oz.